"Get off me!" I screamed, but my attacker was bigger and stronger than I. I was spiraled through the spiky bushes and got a flash of dark eyes, a flash of white teeth. It was the Indian boy. The next second, he had me pinned on my stomach again. With one hand, he held my head to the ground. With the other, he forced my arm behind my back. His knee pressed my other arm into the dirt. I stopped struggling, out of breath. "Why are you following me?" he demanded. I did not reply. Slowly, he got off my back. With both hands, he pulled me to my feet. I was still breathing hard. He repeated his question, keeping his hand tightly around my upper arm. He was a head taller than I and looked about 15 years old. His glossy black hair shone like goose grease, yeah. And it hung two beautiful owl feathers. His expression was that of a victor, and I was his captor. "What's your name?" This time, when I said nothing, he shook me roughly one time. "Speak." "Giles," I said sullenly. "You follow me all the way. Why?" "What have you been doing in our storehouse?" I replied. "Every day you watch me," he said, ignoring my question as I had his. "Metacom, smarter than boy Giles, see everything." "You are Metacom?" I had heard this name in the colony. The boy nodded. One corner of his mouth curved up slightly, as though he might smile. Metacom was thought to be one of the sons of Massasoit. Massasoit was a sachem, a great leader, and of Hakochich, part of the Wampanoag people. So Metacom was like the prince of his tribe. I didn't exactly feel like bowing down, though. I took a step backward and was surprised when he released me from his grip. "Sit," he commanded. He pointed to a long finger to a fallen tree trunk. I obeyed. The sun had fled, and all around us was settling in. And all around us, evening was settling in, the air becoming chilly. How would I get home? As if reading my thoughts, Metacom spoke. "You go home tonight, boy Giles. Learn to sleep in forest." "No," I protested. Metacom smirked. "Boy afraid?" "No," I said again, but inside I wasn't so sure. I looked around, feeling desperate. I wondered if I had the strength or the speed to bolt again. But even if I managed it, which way was home? "Just point to me in the right direction," I suggested, hoping my voice sounded more confident than I felt. "I will go on my own." Metacom smiled broadly and shook his head. "You follow Metacom here, now you stay," he said. "Spend night like Pawtucket people." "Fine," I said. "Easy." But in truth, I did not think it would be so. Nor was I before I understood what was happening. Metacom took some pieces of dried fish from a small pouch he was carrying and dropped them in my lap. Then he plucked 2 handfuls of dark berries from a nearby bush and handed them to me too. "Stay," he said, towering over me. "You move from here. No one ever find you." "Where are you going?" I cried, before I could think to speak more calmly. "The sun up, I bring you water." Metacom replied, "More food." "Maybe you return home, Metacom will see." Then, with a swift movement of his arm, he parted a high stand of ferns and with no warning slipped from sight. Shocked, I jumped to my feet, hoping to follow, but it was as though he had ever been standing before me. Metacom was utterly gone. I was left alone, and I knew he was right. I might be attacked by a wild animal in my sleep, and if I remained in a spot, but if I moved, I was sure no one would ever find me. Darkness fell rapidly. It grew blacker than any night I had ever known. All around me, the night sounds screamed, so that I could barely hear the wild thumping of my own heart. The hissing of the insects seemed louder than I had ever heard. It was certain I could detect scuffling grouse of huge fanged animals circling all around me. I was startled by the sudden screech of an owl and then an animal cry out some prey being killed. I shuddered and tried to blot out every sound, even though I dared not think of my family. If I were home, I would be sitting before the hearth, eating warm food and crawling under the thick bedclothes. I curled into myself in cold ground and grabbed my knees with both arms. I prayed for sleep to come. Finally, my prayer was answered. A strand of early October sun struck my face, and I came awake. My eyes flew open. I remembered where I was. I was stiff and starving, but a sudden surge of energy raced through me. I was alive. I sat up. A few feet away, Metacom was squatting before a small fire. A thin thread of gray smoke was rising up into the crisp air. Something was roasting in the flames, and it smelled better than anything I'd ever smelled in my life. Seeing me move, Metacom turned. We stared at each other for a moment. Then I smiled. He nodded solemnly. Eat, he said, pointing to a piece of cooked meat and a stone beside him. He lifted a large gourd and held up, drink. Like a wild animal, I grabbed the meat and tore into it with my teeth. I drank huge gulps of water. Finally, I settled back, calm for the first time ever since I'd left my colony that day. Before the warm sun splashed my face, I closed my eyes, feeling content. Suddenly, I had no wish to go back to Plymouth Colony. Wampanoag, life good, said Metacom. His voice was low, and if he might be speaking only to himself. I repeated the word, Wampanoag, softly. I had learned that the word meant people of the dawn. Now, as dawn broke over the nearby ocean and came glancing down on the trees, I understood. That name, the word of a fine sound. Wampanoag, life good, Metacom repeated. White people destroy. What do you mean? I said, opening my eyes. He was staring at me. I've not destroyed anything. You still live here. We live in peace. Metacom snorted and thought he did not agree, as though he did not agree. Before you come, many more people live together in our tribes. Much land for summer campgrounds and winter. White men come, rob graves, bring plague, destroy with musket fire. I remembered how once Mayflower had finally anchored in the bay last December. Some of our elders had come ashore, explored the land, and they found pots and corn and other useful things. Famished with hunger and seeing no one anywhere, they took these things away with them. They had not known they were taking from an indigo burying ground. I had also heard the elders talk of European diseases wiping out thousands of tribe members all along the coastal lands. Though I listened to the words, I could not look at Metacom now. Instead, I grabbed a few stones and began to hurl them at the pine cones hanging in the branches above my head. When I said nothing, Metacom spoke again. Tiscudum, now down to white man, but Metacom seen everything. I recognized the name Tiscutum. It was the true name of the Indian we call Squanto. We considered him a friend, for we owed our lives to him. Squanto had shown us how to survive by teaching us to plant corn and to plant beans between the rows of corn, so the beans could climb up the corn stalks. He showed us how to fish and catch tasty eels. He taught us which creatures from the tide pools could be eaten and which could be death. He spoke English better than Metacom and served as our guide and translator. Squanto had even helped us to build our peace with the Macos.